You're watching a Highwire Media podcast.
Welcome to the Dead Reckoning podcast. I'm your host, as always, Larry Lace. Today's episode, we are diving into the Kraken. Yes, we're going for a deep dive on this one in all senses of the word. So make sure those oxygen tanks are full and your mask is clear because it's time to roll backwards off this boat. Scuba diving. Lots of scuba diving references there. Well, I'm not generally afraid of stuff, but the one thing that makes me irrationally fearful is deep water. So I've never really been keen to go scuba diving and stuff because, even on a boat, if I look over the edge, all I can think about is that. And I know it's ridiculous, is that I'm on a boat and below me is just unknown depths and things I could just, it's whatever's down there could just swim towards me and get me. It's also just weird that you're not standing on anything solid, but you're so far above the ground. I don't really know why that really gets me. I'm just not a big fan of deep water. So no scuba diving for me. Sea monsters have been around for as long as people have been able to travel on the sea. Whether you're on a long haul fishing trip, expedition, or whatever, there comes a point when you're far enough out on the water that you can't see anything but the sea. No land, no other boats, nothing but the vast expanse of whatever ocean you're on, stretching as far as you can see in all directions. Have you guys played that game? What is it? Cannot remember what it's called. It's so addictive. It's so fun. You survive a plane crash and you're in the sea. It's a recent game or something recent, within the last couple of years. You're in the sea, then you're on a life raft, and you got to paddle this life raft towards an island. Then you got to craft. So you're making a camp. You're making all this stuff. You eventually make a boat. You have to go around all these shipwrecks and find stuff to hopefully escape. It's very compelling, and it's just the same thing. You're just out on the ocean, and I don't like how deep it is, the sharks and stuff. Is there anything else that would give you such a horrible feeling of unease as that? I mean, yeah, there's loads of things that would make me feel more uneasy than that because, you're on a boat. If I was in the water, I'd be way more uneasy. You can see very far down. Anything could be under there. You don't know how deep it is or what, or whether some awful toothy creature is speeding up like a bullet from the depths at the very second, with its mouth open, ready to swallow your whole boat. If I was in the water, I think it's going to swallow my whole body, but I don't think it's going to swallow the whole boat. I mean, if even a giant blue whale or something, they're not going to eat a boat. Boats are big and not food. Is there a huge bulb of cephalopod lurking mere feet below or waiting to whip out its tentacles and destroy your vessel? Or will it just cruise by underneath without you even realizing how near death you were? With water covering 70% of our planet and at least 80% of this never having been explored, it's little wonder that the seas and oceans hold so much fear and folklore, going as far back as humans do. Before we crack on with the main character of this episode, we do need to do a little bit of due diligence and go back and look at stories that predate what we collectively call the Kraken. Actually, excuse me. Way before this particular sea monster was given a name, we had, I'm going to butcher these names because they're from way back in the day. We had Scylla and Charybdis popping up in Greek mythology and in Homer's Odyssey. Around the 8th century BC, those were two sea monsters who lived on opposite sides of a channel, meaning that you'd have to choose to go nearer one than the other. Apparently, the phrase between Scylla and Charybdis is synonymous, with between a rock and a hard place. But probably only among the most dedicated classical scholarly types. Yep, that's something I've never said, but I'll often use between a rock and a hard place. I've seen Scylla described as basically having 6 dogs instead of legs and normal heads. If someone replaced my legs with dogs, I'd be like, oh, for God's sake, what happened to my legs? Now I've just got these 2 dogs attached to me. But also having 12 feet and 6 heads on necks like snakes, dude, people who made up mythology in the past were smoking crack. Or whatever they smoked in the past, because what do you have? I have dogs for legs. legs, and oh, head's a serpent? Like, what the heck? Charybdis is a little more straightforward, either causing or actually being a whirlpool that sucked boats down to their dooms. Other classical sea monsters of the time include Cetus, which was more whale-like, various hydras, and the biblical sea serpent, Leviathan. You may have noticed that none of these monsters really sound much like what we know as the Kraken today, which is generally represented as some sort of huge octopus or squid thing. You probably got the name Kraken from Old Norse, as the thing first burst onto the scene in the Norwegian Sea. But definition wise, I've seen things ranging from twisted to malformed tree to crawling to anchor. Germans use the word krak to both refer to the Kraken specifically and also just octopus in general. But to avoid confusion, they used the word octopus for the non fictional creature. The Kraken was also supposedly called, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it in German, but it means sea mischief, which makes it sound like a naughty little troublemaker rather than a monstrous beast that crushed ships and ate people. Seems like Norse people had lots of other monsters going on. In the older parts of the globe, there was also the sea mist or steam, which appeared in written accounts at least as early as 13th century. This was a sea monster that hung around near Greenland and apparently self-chummed to attract fish. Basically, that means it vomited out stuff into the sea as bait and then ate all the fish that came up, turned up to it to eat it. Well, then those fish are going to go through a cycle, aren't they? It's like the Venus flytrap that eats flies and then doesn't use the rotting fly flesh to attract more flies. Or flies like, if you're just walking down the street and you're like, wow, that smells good, I should go eat that. And then you go into the building and it's just a dead person like rotting away and you're like, mmm. There was also the Lingbacker or heatherback, which was a monster so large and covered in vegetation that it was mistaken for an island. When sailors pitched up alongside, went for a walkabout on it, it would submerge and drown them all. These two monsters might just be elements of yet another enormous beast, which was called a stichion. Spitalone, something like that. Definitely not pronouncing it right. Appearing in the 2nd century, actually sounds quite similar to what one guy said as pronouncing it as I spit a cologne. Appearing in the 2nd century text, Physiologus, the giant whale or turtle, pretends to be an island to lure unwitting sailors, and it also attracts fish to it with a sweet smell. There are actually about a billion other sea monsters that we could talk about, but these seem to be the main ones in the formation of the Kraken legends. The Lingbacker fell out of fashion over the years. People started conflating them, and eventually there could only be one sea monster to rule the sea. It became known as the Kraken. By the mid 1700s, the Kraken had become an enormous, tentacled thing that could destroy ships by wrapping its arms around them, but could also pull them under the water via a whirlpool when it submerged, like our old friend Charybdis. Dude, what is with these pronunciations? I know I'm getting them horribly wrong, but honestly, I don't care, especially when it comes to mythology. How did it end up as a giant cephalopod when earlier monsters didn't really have those characteristics? Well, it's probably because as time went on and people sailed around more, they saw things that actually bore a resemblance to this creature. And thus the legend grew. Goodbye whale with an island on its back. Hello, much larger version of a squid or octopus. It's also because starting in the 1700s, the Kraken started making its name via scientific journals and also from alleged actual encounters. Obviously, it's not like an actual kraken or whatever, but there are giant squids, right? So I feel like they found one and they had it like that weird big thing that they have. And then they also found like some big something from a whale or whatever. And it even had bigger beaks from those squids inside. And so scientists were like, yes, massive squids down there, which is kind of scary. Swedish biologist Carl Linnaeus, also known as the father of taxonomy or the slightly less catchy godfather of binomial nomenclature for creating biological classifications for all known organisms. You know, the names like gorilla and ratus. He started Systema Naturé 1735, and guess what made an appearance in the first edition? The Kraken. Classified as Microcosmus marinus, which comes in the cephalopod class under the genus of the cuttlefish. Cuttlefish are like the least intimidating. It's like a little cuttlefish. I don't actually know what a cuttlefish looks like. I think I've only seen cuttlefish shells on like the beach, but they're small, and I don't imagine they belong to a particularly intimidating creature. Up to this point, I hadn't thought of cuttlefish at all, as they're quite small, although darn if they don't look like your archetypal kraken, kind of mixture of a squid and an octopus. The Kraken also appeared in 1746's Borsod til Norges Naturlige Historie, with Linnaeus describing it as a singular monster, albeit one he admitted he'd never have actually seen. Not long after, it seems that Linnaeus realized the error of his ways and left the sea monster out of further editions of his work. But this early rubber stamping of the creature earned it a real place in history and also cemented the now common aesthetic of the monster as a cephalopod. In the 1750s, Erik Pontoppidan, A Natural History of Norway, which again featured the kraken as a real creature. He described it as round, flat, and full of arms, and the longest and most surprising of all, the animal creation. Eric gave various examples of what its classification could actually be, ranging from a type of octopus or starfish to a giant crab. When you said like attempts at Norway's natural history, you really were just making an attempt, were you? Well, it could be an octopus, or it could be a giant crab. I've never seen one. No one knows it's actually real. But it could be any of those things. Yeah, it could also be a kettle, but it's probably not. He also said it was so big you could mistake it for a mountain when rising out of the sea, and that it had a circumference of 2.5 kilometers. Although I don't know if that was the body by itself or if it had all of its arms outstretched. Whatever it is, it's ridiculous. You're just making it up. It might also be worth pointing out here that Pontoppidan seemed to be really into sea weirdness, also featuring giant sea serpents and mermaids in his natural history. Yeah, bro, you made an attempt, didn't you? Had a crack at it, some might say. The 1800s brought more unsubstantiated tales of encounters with the beast, and paintings, woodcuts, and engravings started solidifying the current recognizable form of the kraken. There were stories of how to tell if a kraken was nearby. If your boat is a couple miles out on a hot day over a particularly deep part of the sea, all the fish in the area would be pushed to the surface as the kraken started rising. Rumor has it that some fishermen actively tried to find the kraken as if they could get away in time. The amount of fish they would catch would be worth the risk. In 1833, William Jardine published the Naturalist's Library, featuring a chapter on the kraken, which includes this bit, quote, "The belief in this monster is, however, universal among the sailors and fishermen of the Norwegian coast, and it has been alluded to by all the Scandinavian writers from the earliest period down to present day." He quotes tales of the kraken from the Pontoppidan's writings before saying, quote, "Probably without much difficulty, this extraordinary kraken may be identified with certain species of sepia or cuttlefish, which have been described in the annals of science." Dude, this is like you're going on the internet and just finding a fact that someone has written on a website and then writing it down as well and being like, fact, substantiated. The problem is then you get like two places that are saying the fact is true, even though they're just all copying each other, and it often gets it wrong. This was like the misinformation before there was the internet. Jardine then quotes someone who had seen a massive cuttlefish, but I don't think they get that large. So maybe this person had actually seen a giant squid. He goes on to list several examples of ships and humans being attacked by massive arms or tentacular, and also sightings of the kraken by different people all over the world. He's pretty much saying throughout his book, I think the kraken's real because loads of people have seen it, even though it's not really confirmed. As well as saying the kraken might actually exist or be it as a natural creature, Pontoppidan and Jardine put into print many alleged examples of the creature attacking ships, grabbing and killing sailors, and creating whirlpools to drag its hapless victims to their death. In 1851, Herman Melville name checks it in Moby Dick, although it's a skeptical reference. I mean, yes, it's also like so hard to read. Like, okay, I don't even know what he's saying. Reading things from the past is so hard. I've tried reading books. Like, I tried reading The Count of Monte Cristo, which is apparently amazing. And I'm just reading it and I'm like, oh yeah, but the old language, it's like hard work. And all I do all day is read. And then it's just like to read something hard is like for fiction in the evening is really hard. You're just like, I don't want to read this. I just want to read something easy. In 1861, a small French warship called the Electon had one of the first recorded encounters with a real live giant squid. While there have been anecdotal stories about them before, the general scientific consensus of this period was that they didn't actually exist. This is slightly confusing as the Kraken had been listed as an existing creature 100 years before, but a large squid was not thought of being such a viable creature. Well, apparently not. The crew tried to capture the squid, but it was too heavy to be pulled aboard, and all they were left with was, at the end of the day, was what they called the tail, which I assume to be the top thin part, not the end of an arm. This part by itself weighed about 30 pounds, which is about twice the weight of a bowling ball, or one-third the weight of a toilet. Apparently it was sent off for study, but it seems to have gotten lost almost immediately. This thrust the idea of the Kraken back into the public consciousness, especially in the world of literature. So we are now awash with Krakens popping up in pieces by Victor Hugo, Jules Verne, and John Wyndham. So now it's time to talk cephalopods, octopi, whatever. People thought the Kraken was or wasn't, is now commonly perceived to be a giant cephalopod of some sort. The common characteristics of cephalopods that they are marine animals with definite heads and tentacles or arms, and the ability to squirt ink. Obviously, octopi, squid, cuttlefish are classified as cephalopods, and so is the nautilus. But we can count that one out as it has a shell, and no mention that Kraken has said it was actually in a huge shell the entire time. We're going to talk about the differences between octopuses and squid for a moment, even though I think the discussion is moot, as the Kraken is a legend and not actually a real creature. So it doesn't matter whether it's more like an octopus or a squid, as it doesn't exist. Anyway, early illustrations of the Kraken in its familiar cephalopod form definitely skew octopus for me. Many of the pictures show tentacles or arms coming out of the sea and wrapping around a boat. With the monster's two large eyes and a bit of its head and body showing, this gives the impression that the head is more rounded, like the octopus, and not elongated with a triangular end like the squid. Also, the arms all seem more or less of the same length and covered in suckers, as well as having 8 arms. Squid also have 2 longer tentacles with suckers just on the ends, not all the way down. Actually, some squids have really creepy looking barbs and hooks on the end of their tentacles that can swivel about to keep hold of their prey. Obviously, nowadays, anything goes with the Kraken being depicted however you want, as long as there are tentacles involved somewhere. By the way, I have been throwing out arms and tentacles somewhat interchangeably, although I know there's technically a difference with arms having the suction cup things all over them and tentacles only having them at the end. Thus, an octopus has no tentacles but does have 8 arms. You know what? When we're talking specifically about the Kraken, I think we can use whichever one we feel like. And if you don't agree, refer to the previous point I made about it not being real. The early drawings of the Kraken may look more like octopuses because everyone knew octopuses existed. They don't live as deep down as larger squid, and even now they're viewed as extremely weird creatures. So it would be easy to model a many-armed monster on one of these. When the existence of things like giant squid became known later in the 19th century, however, it seemed more likely that the Kraken myth was based on these guys, as they can grow much larger than the largest octopus. There are little squid and giant squid. The largest squid are mysterious animals that live hundreds of meters down in oceans across the globe where humans just can't go because they live way down deep. They're the products of the amazingly named abyssal gigantism, where invertebrates can grow massive compared to their relatives living in shallow waters. Which kind of seems counterintuitive because you're like, isn't there loads of pressure down there? So you'd be like, wouldn't that make them like small? But apparently not. And I'm sure there's a good reason. While some had washed up or come to surface in the past, a few strandings occurred in New Zealand and around Newfoundland in the 1870s and 1880s, bringing the possible monster firmly into the realm of reality. The giant squid was also finally officially classified as the Archteluthus dux in 1857 by Norwegian naturalist Japetus Steenstrup. It wasn't until 2004 that we had any photos of a living giant squid in its deep natural habitat. So it's no wonder that scientists in the past um, argued over whether it was real or not, and if a giant squid was real, why not something even larger? Well, if you weren't already aware, there is something even larger than the giant squid in the cold depths of the ocean, and that is, drumroll please, the colossal squid. Well, their bodies are much larger, longer, and heavier, but the tentacles don't grow quite as long as the giant squid. It is massive, though, with one found in New Zealand weighing almost twice as much as a giant squid. 490 kilograms to the puny 275 kilograms that giant squid can grow to. It also has a massive beak, much larger than the giant squids, and those things are sharp. Lengthwise, though, there's not much competition, or at least not yet. As with most things that go on in the murky depths of the world's oceans, we just don't know that much about the colossal squid. An 18-meter or 60-foot long squid is no joke. That's 12 Danny DeVitos laid end to end in the water beside you. It's a terrifying image, isn't it? In case you've been wondering how big octopuses get, you're going to be disappointed. The largest species of octopus is the giant Pacific octopus, and while the average length from top to tip is quite impressive at about 5 meters, this is less than half the length that a giant squid can get up to. We can be fairly sure the sightings of a giant squid, or possibly even a colossal one, are what gave the Kraken rumor legs, or rather, arms. But what of its aggressive behavior? Could a squid really attack a boat? That is fairly unlikely, as the giant squid is built to be a deep sea dweller and only comes to the surface if it's dead or dying. It's possible that one was still alive to fling a tentacle or arm over a small boat at some point, but this would not have been an attempt to crush the boat or as a precursor to picking up individual crew members. It would have just been something to hold on to. The muscles in the squid's tentacles aren't strong enough to wrap around and constrict or crush anything. They mostly just dangle down in the depths, waiting for prey to come along. We've heard of epic battles between giant squid and sperm whales, but the squid aren't the aggressors here. They're not engaging in arm-to-mouth combat with the whales to see who will win. They're just trying to get away. I think we're all pretty much convinced that any tales of the Kraken, at least from the past couple hundred years, have just been tall tales spun from an encounter with a squid that was much larger than anyone would have been expecting. But what if there actually was something even more enormous in the past? We knew that there were huge examples of modern day animals like the giant ground sloth and giant beaver way back in the Ice Age, and the megalodon was about 3 times the size of current great whites. So could there have been another deep sea titan ruling the waves? Since 2011, paleontologist Mark McMahon, could you have more M's in your name if you tried? There's 4 M's in your name, and it's not even long. So anyways, 4M has been putting forth a theory about a huge cephalopod that was killing Ichthyosaurus about 250 million years ago. Considering the size of the prey and the remains of a fossilized beak he found in 2013, the ancient sea monster would have reached about 30 meters, 100 feet, or twice the length of your largest giant squid these days. And what evidence has he found? Well, apparently there are fossilized remains of Ichthyosaurs, such as the very large Shanosaurus popularis, where the vertebrae have been moved around and placed into neat patterned rows, resembling a double row of suction cups that you would find on the underside of an octopus's arm. This also mimics known behavior of squid, and especially octopuses, that are highly intelligent and can manipulate objects in this way. So 4M believes that the formation of those vertebrae to look like a double row of suckers is intentional. A cephalopod's calling card, if you will, or even something of a self-portrait. I mean, okay, I get they're smart, but are they that smart? It seems a bit unrealistic. It seems more just they were like sucking on those bones, and then they just laid them down. Or maybe the tentacles are twitching, but the creature is no longer alive, as this theory is not supported by anyone else apparently in the entire world. A blog about this by Tyler Greenfield, who was a paleontology student at the time, clearly sets out how, thanks to what we know about marine life in the Triassic period and what we know about the evolution of cephalopods, that this monster thing is just impossible. This brings us back to the burning question at the top of the episode. Did late Triassic celluloids actually have biserial suckers? What he's asking is if these types of cephalopods had double rows of suckers at the time in the past, and the answer is a resounding no. They only had uniserial suckers. So this puts the idea that the ginormous beast was leaving a picture of himself made out of vertebrae of other animals. Greenfield also points out that the only evidence we have of Triassic period celluloids are all less than a meter long. So are there any other explanations for how these neatly arranged vertebrae formations could have occurred? Well, yes, of course they are. How about just random chance, as there have only been 2 examples of this found so far? David Fastovsky, paleontologist who sat through one of 4M's presentations, states, quote, "A kraken isn't really necessary. Everything can be explained by much less exotic means." Ah yes, old Fastovsky there, a fan of Occam's razor. The simplest solution usually is the right one. And old 4M's like, nah, giant, colossal, turbo dinosaur squid. Kind of a killjoy, but he's not wrong. The fossilized beak wasn't much in the way of conclusive evidence either, as it wasn't complete and could really have been anything. Even if it was part of a beak, there wasn't enough of it left to be able to extrapolate the size of a cephalopod out to 30 meters. Just squidding. Why this can't be real? While the sea is vast and unknowable, and even the largest vessels are nothing more than dots on its surface, with the combined knowledge we have of the fossils, animal biology, and real-life specimens, or lack thereof, it's safe to conclude there is no such thing as the Kraken in a 30-meter-plus form that consciously attacks boats for fun. Sailors who might have been feeling a little on edge being out in the middle of nowhere probably saw a large cephalopod, which might have even attached itself to their boat, and their imaginations inflated the encounter when they got back to shore. This would mean more people on the lookout for the Kraken, and therefore more sightings, whether based on something real or not. Might there have been even larger species of squid or octopus that we don't know about? Maybe. But it's unlikely they're going to be more than twice the size of what we've currently got. Why? Well, the ocean's real big. There could be all sorts of weird shit down there. I don't believe there's an actual Kraken, drowning boats and stuff, but I do believe there could be some big ass shit down there that we don't know about. Didn't we say 80% of it's unexplored? Who knows what's down there? The main mystery for me is here why the ancient Greek and Romans recorded the giant squid as a real animal, and then it fell into the realm of legend for centuries before being recognized again in the 1850s. Pliny the Elder, 1st century AD Roman naturalist and author, wrote a book about a squid measuring more than 9 meters with a body like a barrel in his work, Natural History. And Aristotle had mentioned it even earlier in Historia Animalium, although not quite as such a gigantic specimen. I suppose the giant squid's elusiveness doesn't help, and it was probably only when countries started exploring further across the oceans that the chances of seeing one increased. There also haven't been any modern-day Kraken sightings, and we have to keep going back to the same boring point as we do for all cryptids and monsters. Are there just 1 or 2 that live for thousands or even millions of years, or are there enough of these things to maintain a breeding population? Neither seem very likely, so I think we can leave this beast in the story where it belongs. And that is the Kraken. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Do you think the Kraken never existed? Or do you think it's, just a fantasy? Let me know. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, Larry M. Lease. It's buymeacoffee.com/Larry M. Lease. As always, your support helps the channel grow. upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, be able to pay them, and eventually take this show on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.